Hey, good morning. This is Sabine. I'd like to share a three-part video with you today. It's based on the research I did the past week and the article I published on my blog Sabine Shares. A link to that blog is included in the description box below, so you can read along or read it afterward. The title of the blog is B is for Breaker, Q is for Quarantine. And the first video is going to be about the scriptures and the celestial signs, which can help us gain insight into what is happening right now, what the enemy is throwing against us especially, and how the Lord uses that to help us spiritually prepare for not just what is happening right now, but what is coming on the near horizon, and how he, in his capacity as a breaker of chains and strongholds, but also as a breaker, untying us from the world in the rapture, and breaking of the opening of the seals, is all reflected in the constellation Perseus. Perseus is part of the throne room scene we meditated upon prior. And in addition, you see an image over here of an ancient manner of quarantine. And that is going to be topic of discussion as well, how ancient matters of quarantine are being copied as we speak. In the second video, I'm going to expose what the enemy has been predictively programming, which is happening today. It's easier to see that in hindsight, but also what they are programming, which is going to take place from now on. And I'm going to focus especially on the Economist cover of 2015 and the iPad Goat. I believe there's going to be a couple of insights which have not been shared by others yet, which may help us understand what the enemy agenda is. And the third video is going to be about what the elite ultimately intend to do, namely the crowning of the serpent or the crowning of the Antichrist. They've been foreshadowing this for a really long time. We can find that in the scriptures, of course, but also in the celestial signs. I found a location in the heavens which reflect an uncapped pyramid, and this is what they're acting out on the world stage, and is also found in the movie The iPad Goat. So let us progress with the scriptures and the celestial signs. So we're going to build on the heavenly throne room scene with King Cepheus and Queen Cassiopeia from the earlier posting. The link is listed, so if you haven't read that, I invite you to do that. And I have come to understand that the breaker, the constellation of Perseus, has a critical role. We haven't given it a lot of attention last time, but he deserves that attention. So looking at the constellation Perseus, we see the Lord in his capacity as the breaker, coming to set free Andromeda in order for her to be elevated to the position of queen. And the Lord is fighting on our behalf to overcome strongholds and to trod the enemy underfoot, in addition to him ultimately breaking us free from the world in the rapture, and a breaking of the seals of judgment afterward. So I'm going to draw on the work of biblical astronomers Bullinger and Seiss. Bullinger says about Perseus, "In Perseus we have set before us a mighty man, called in the Hebrew Peretz, from which we have the Greek form Persis or Perseus." It's also found in the book of Romans. It's the same word which is used of the Lord Jesus Christ in the book of Micah, where we read that he will gather the remnant of Israel, not only pointing to the first fulfillment of the people of Israel at the time, but also now the second fulfillment of the people of the spiritual Israel, waiting for the Lord to come and break them free from the world. So here you see a depiction of Perseus the Breaker and Andromeda. Andromeda's feet are still shackled but untied, which is a reflection of her salvation, and her hands are both tied and chained to the rock at this point in time, which means that she is not completely freed yet. We are still in the world waiting for the breaker to come to set us free and bring us into the throne room. So Perseus in his right arm is drawing a sword. He is combating on our behalf, but he already has the head of the enemy in his left hand. The enemy reflects the trodden underfoot. So this is what is pictured to us over here. We see a glorious breaker taking his place before his redeemed, breaking forth at their head, breaking down all barriers, breaking the heads of Leviathan and all its host. In his right hand he has his sore and great strong sword, lifting up to smite and break down the enemy. He has wings on his feet, which tell us that he is coming very swiftly. In his left hand he carries the head of the enemy, whom he has already slain. The head, which by perversion the Greeks call the head of Medusa, being ignorant that its Hebrew root means the trodden underfoot. It's also called Rosh Satan in Hebrew, the head of the adversary, and Al-One in Arabic, the subdued, or Al-Ghul, the evil spirit. So while Bullinger focuses on the Lord's capacity as the breaker over strongholds and the rapture, biblical astronomer Joseph Seiss refers to Perseus as the breaker of the seals. Christ, the very Lamb of our text, breaking the way of his people through all the doors and gates of their present imprisonment and disability, and dashing to pieces all the antagonizing powers which stand in the way of their full deliverance and redemption. So the Lamb in the Apocalypse is the breaker of the seals and of apostate nations, the same as the Son mentioned in the second Psalm. Out of devotion to his king, he undertakes to destroy the Gorgons, demons, as far as they are destructible. For this he descends into hell and brings forth armor from thence. He is in communion with divine wisdom, and thereby girded in splendor and led unerringly. He is winged, given a diamond sword, as heaven's messenger and herald, to undo the powers of evil and administer deliverance and prosperity. So we know that while we are still in this world, the Lord will continue to heal, deliver us, and fight on our behalf. He wounds the dire Gorgons in the head and carries off their power. He punishes Leviathan with his sore and great and strong sword. He breaks the bonds of Andromeda, makes her his bride amid high festival, at which he puts down all opposition. And thereupon he goes forth to countries far and near, punishing and expelling tyrants and usurpers, rooting out untruth and corrupt worship, blessing and rejoicing the city and the kingdom of heroes. All this interprets with wonderful literalness and brilliancy when understood of the promised seed of the woman, the Lamb that was slain, going forward at the head of his people as the breaker, bringing death and destruction to the monsters of evil, setting wronged captives free, joining them to himself in glory everlasting. Joseph Seiss addresses us directly when he states, "Dear friends, may I not here turn to you to ask, have you been brought into fellowship and communion with this church and congregation of the Lord? If so, then thank God for it, and be glad before him that he has bestowed upon you so great a favor. Bless his name for the grace that has led you into those holy gates, and for the treasures and dignities of which he has thus made you heirs. Trials, dangers, and disabilities may be upon you now, but the Lamb is in the midst of the throne to uphold, protect, and comfort you. And by his blood and intercession, you are safe. Cling to him and his golden fleece, and no malignity of the destroyer shall ever be able to touch a hair on your head. Wait and pray on in patience and in hope. The victorious Perseus comes for your deliverance and to share with you his own triumphant immortality. Or does the present moment still find you, still lingering without the gates, and far aside from the assembly and congregation of God's flock? He's speaking to the unsaved right now. These starry lights that look down so loving you upon you are hung with admonitions of your danger, and in diamond utterance point you to the better way. There's no speech nor language, their voice is not heard, but their line is gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world, marking out the tabernacle of the Son of Righteousness, in which alone there is covenanted safety and salvation for exposed and helpless man. In full harmony with the written book, night by night they hold forth their pictorial showings to corroborate the testimony of the prophets and the apostles, that the erring seed of Adam may learn wisdom, enter the chambers of security, and shut themselves into life and glory against the time when the breaker shall come. The light bearers in the sky join with the light bearers in the church in giving out the one great testimony of God. He that believeth on the Son hath everlasting life, and he that believeth not the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God abideth on him. So there is both comfort and consolation in Perseus and Andromeda, but also a dire warning for those not yet having entered into salvation. So if we look at the name of the bright star in the head of Perseus' enemy. Oh, by the way, these are the alarm sounds in the Netherlands. They sound this alarm every Monday exactly at 12 o'clock, the first day of the month. So that may be very appropriate. This is like a testing alarm. So they test what was originally known as the war alarms. So if any calamity is going on, these alarms are being sounded, but they are tested every month at this particular time. So going back to Al Ghul. So the bright star's name, Al Ghul, or demon star, is reflected of it being a double or binary star. And the double nature of this demon star is used by the elite in their programming, and it's going to come into play a little bit later in the article. So in Greek mythology, the Al Ghul star represented the eye of the Medusa. In Egyptian mythology, it was called Horus, so the sun god, son of Zeus. In Hebrew, it's known as Rosh Hasatan, Satan's head. And a Latin name for Al Ghul from the 16th century was caput larvae, or specter's head. And this is what the enemy is using in their programming as well. As a specter's or actress's voice was capable of expressing the whole spectrum of emotions, an entire range of radiation of different wavelengths, part of which is normally visible to the naked eye. So those spectating her, gazing upon her, could succumb to her witchcraft, her seductive influence. And after a prolonged spectatorship, a hardening of sin could happen, even unto petrification or turning into stone, as we will see in the mythological symbolism later in the article. So this interchanging of this demon star from brightness into dimming, from presenting himself as a roaring lion and then into a subtle serpent again, back into an angel of light. He is transforming himself continually to manipulate, deceive, but ultimately to devour and destroy us. So this is the conclusion of the first video and the main portion of the Celestial Signs and Scriptures. There's a little bit of celestial information left, and then the decode of the enemy signaling. So see you there.